All right, we should be live.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for giving us your time today for VR Download. I'm Ian Hamilton in New York, joined today by David Heaney from London in not the UploadVR studios today, in Horizon Workrooms, as we talk about the next steps in personal computing. We're wearing Quest 3 headsets today, and we're still using hand tracking. We've got built-in microphones. We've got virtual tablets in front of us showing us our computers. And I'm going to be able to keep an eye on the comments there over here as well. Thank you to our patrons for supporting the work we do over on UploadVR.com. In case this is your first time, we've been following VR's development closely for more than a decade, and we expect decades of progress ahead of us. You can become a paying member of UploadVR.com to support our work directly. We thank our patrons by name here on this podcast and listed on the website. That includes XR Developer News, Podum, the developer of Smash Drums there, Holonet, Justin Corcoran at Phosphor Studios, Richard Meller, Parmesan, Nick Levesque, Qubits, Steve Lucas, David Wyatt, DePonch, Soul Presence, Soul Retreat out there, and Wim Rygart. David, what do we have today?
Yes, hello everyone. Apologies in advance if I cough here. I'm still quite sick. I spent the first kind of week of this year unable to even get out of bed level sick, and I'm still kind of coughing a lot. So I'm going to be muting quite constantly. That's what I just did then. If you hear me stop speaking and kind of very obviously mute myself, that's the reason. So maybe I'll not be able to get full paragraphs out. We are today joining you from Horizon Workrooms. We are at the point where the old meta avatars for our studio have been completely deprecated, so we just can't use that anymore at all. That'll no longer load. So apologies for this. We will find a more permanent solution going into the year. We have sort of 9 topics today in roughly 4 sections. So we're going to firstly talk about Gorilla Tag and VRChat setting usage records in VR headsets. We'll then have an Apple section where we talk about Apple's open source on-device volumetric scene AI system, which is interesting because it's quite rare to see something like that come out from Apple, and already a developer has made a Vision OS app using it that you can try out today. We've talked a lot about the server-side stuff, but this is actually an on-device version of sort of this idea of turning a single image into a volumetric scene. We then also talk about the Apple Immersive Lakers broadcasts, very limited in a live sense, that you have to actually physically be in the broadcast location and be on certain kind of subscription services. There are a lot of caveats and asterisks there, but it is kind of a start for live Apple Immersive video that we've been talking about so long. We will then have a meta glasses discussion section where we talk about 3 topics. First being conversation focus rolling out in early access, that feature that amplifies the voice of the person you're speaking to, the person in front of you. If you're in a very kind of noisy environment, that's a accessibility feature for people who have hearing difficulties. We'll then talk about them rolling out in early access again, still handwriting recognition for the meta neural band for the display glasses. And they also delayed their plans to launch it in Europe. That was going to happen early this year. They now say unprecedented demand and production kind of limitations there mean that they need to catch up with US demand before they think about launching it internationally. Again, apologies for the constant muting here. I have to cough. Our third topic in the Meta glasses discussion will be Meta and EssilorLuxottica discussing doubling or even tripling smart glasses production. And that then feeds into our final section, which I'm sure if you've read the VR news at all this week, you'll know what it's going to be, the layoffs at Meta Reality Labs. So Meta has completely closed and laid off everyone at Twisted Pixel, the developer of Deadpool VR, Armature, the developer of Resident Evil 4 VR, the Quest 2 port, and Sanzaru Games, the developer of Asgard's Wrath. And additionally, as we've reported, Supernatural is no longer getting new content or features. So you can still access that theoretically if you've never played it and you're in the US. You could pay $10 and do a bunch of fitness stuff there, but there will be no new content or features arriving to that app. So if you're an existing subscriber, it would be very hard to justify continuing subscribing. And the writing is in the wall there that, of course, at some point that's going to be shut down. And then, as we just reported today, um, Camouflage, the developer of Batman Arkham Shadow, has also seen significant layoffs, and the sequel has been cancelled. Although an interesting kind of detail in that story, it was actually Sanzaru, the developer of Asgard's Wrath, developing that sequel, but it has been cancelled. So you can see that this kind of strategy of Meta of funding these high budget production value VR games to sell Quest headsets is over. And we'll get into that discussion at the end.
All right, it's great to see you, David. I'm sorry you're not well. Our audience is trying to grasp why we've been ejected from our previous studio. That's how I was trying to process it 5 minutes before here. I asked you, were we evicted from our studio? David pointed out we just had an old API cut off from use, and that effectively ended our ability to get into the studio. But effectively 20 minutes ago or 15 minutes ago now, I tried to open our app that we've used for years to broadcast our show to you. It didn't launch. We realized that they had killed those avatars fully. And now we're in the meta avatar, expressive avatar generation. We're using much of the same technologies that we were using there. You saw my intro was almost identical to the intro I give in our own studio, but we were sort of forced into here. And then on our way in to here, we found out Horizon Workrooms is also closing. So here we are in Horizon Workrooms, a product that will soon be closed as well. So we can't even stream from the place you currently see us. So I understand if our audience is going through some uh, I don't know, cognitive dissonance, something weird going on out there trying to grasp. These people sound a little bit different. They look a little bit different, but I've also been tuning into them for years too. Yeah, that's what happens. So that's the background behind our discussion today. And so then, in consideration, David, of our need to kind of encapsulate this episode as quickly as we can, I'm just going to move right on to the Gorilla Tag and VRChat article talking about them setting usage record numbers in VR headsets. So this is a story I reported out across a couple stories here, but VRChat had, let's see the exact numbers, right under 150,000 people in VRChat on New Year's Eve across the United States, across the entire New Year's Eve event. So that's I checked in with VRChat, and VRChat said that well over half of the people who use VRChat access it from VR headsets. And then I also talked to Gorilla Tag. Gorilla Tag held an event quite recently where, as it was explained to me, I didn't see this myself. I wasn't there to witness it. But in Gorilla Tag, if you were on the Planet of the Apes last weekend or over the last couple months, actually, you saw a green dot in the sky and you started to wonder what it was about. And it turns out the people at Gorilla Tag built up an entire story, lore, a live event that green dot in the sky of the Planet of the Apes was a comet coming to crash into the planet. It crashed into the planet. Now there's an alien on the loose on Gorilla Island. So when that happened, it was a Saturday, January 10th at 10 a.m. Pacific. Another Axiom, that's the makers of Gorilla Tag, they say that 110,000 people were in their VR headsets all around the world, being monkeys and witnessing the arrival of the alien on Gorilla Island. So, yeah, what a wonderful place to start off with our discussion here, right? You've got our setting has been forced to change, and I've just given you the reported numbers from two of the largest VR social networks there are over the last 2 weeks. Anything else to add here, David, before we move on to the next subject?
No, I think it's just quite clear that Gorilla Tag has been, a success for years now. They've reported millions of monthly actives and even 1 million daily actives. But before, we'll get more into this at the end, but there is this big contrast between these kind of free to play, very social experiences versus what has been shut down at Meta, which is obviously going to be these kind of traditional single player experiences. And there's this massive contrast there where, 10 years ago, if you'd asked a typical kind of gamer what they think VR would be most used for, you would think these kind of meaty single player experiences. And that's actually just not what the market is saying. If you look at all of these most popular experiences, it's been VRChat, Rec Room, Gorilla Tag, all of these kind of other new wave of content that this aimed at kind of teens and younger. So um, this is unsurprising, but those numbers are obviously very healthy to see for that segment. For the VRChat one, I would always push back and say, I find it a bit frustrating that they won't say how many of those people were in a VR headset, because VRChat is obviously also available on flat screen, and I would just love them to just say how many people are in the VR.
Yeah, but I do appreciate the context we're able to provide here at UploadVR, trying to bring these numbers up and let more people realize these numbers that are out there, right? To your point, David, right? Like Meta has always been cagey about active use inside of their headsets, all the way back to Gear VR. Mark Zuckerberg walking past those rows of journalists, all locked into their Gear VR headsets, and I think he got up on stage and gave an indication that 1 million headsets had been sold or something like that. If I could be misconstruing the exact event where he announced that, but it was around that time. And you think, oh, 1 million headsets! Wow, VR is here, right? And that was the Gear VR, and you can't think of like a there's few platforms more dead than Gear VR. Um, I'm looking at our comments here. There was a commenter asking, why are we putting the thing everyone wants to talk about to the end of the discussion? Well, we realize we give a lot of space for our commenters to shape our discussion here on the VR download. If we don't bring up your comments directly, we see them. They inform what we're thinking. We often read out your comments. And so we tend to see shows here at VR Download that build over the course of them, the audience sort of trickling in uh, over the span of the globe and virtual reality.
Yeah.
And I forgot I didn't get to do my full intro here that our audience has even started referencing here, because I was a little disheveled here at the start. But we've got time travelers out there who are catching up to us at 2x speed, and we know we've got people listening through us through a universal translator too. So yeah, are we ready to move on here? Anything else here to add?
Well, no, I was just going to respond to what you were saying about the numbers, right, before, like, and actually talk about the topic. So, I think when it comes to numbers, this idea, what we heard from Gear VR at that time was that there were 10 million headsets sold and 1 million monthly active. But I think monthly active is an incredibly unuseful figure when it comes to something like VR, because that includes someone just turning their headset on once a month, and that's not a useful statistic at all. And that's why I think these statistics from Gorilla Tag and VRChat concurrent users are kind of the ideal statistic, because that's very, very hard to fluff, right? It's how many people are physically in there together at once. Um, Daily actives are even a little bit kind of, fluffy, because that could be someone just booting up and instantly closing the app. Ideally, you want to see really, really rich figures, right? Like average minutes per session and the number of sessions and uniques and things like that. Uh, that would be a lot better to understand the health of the market. But I think as far as things go, concurrent usage is probably the best figure. So I'm very happy to see Gorilla Tag and VRChat give these kind of figures. And Meta is not the only company that is cagey about saying how many people are using these things. It's clear that it's the rare exception for a company to give truly valuable statistics in this sense.
Well, and that's why, I mean, it does add some value to our work here at UploadVR. I'm so encouraged by all the writers we have contributing to our work here. I've been chatting with a bunch of new writers who are really starting to dig their heels into different parts of virtual reality. If you are interested in writing about something about virtual reality, you can try to get in contact with me. My email is dead right now. It's overwhelmed by things. So like, yeah,
You use the
what?
word dead to mean overwhelmed. I think dead would typically mean kind of empty. I think it's the opposite of that,
It's
right?
what's the opposite of inbox zero, David?
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm the same.
Inbox infinity
Yeah,
is what my inbox is right now. So that's I'll try to get back to you. Feel free to make pitches multiple times politely over the span of time if you really need to. But that's I'm working with writers out there who are doing some really cool things. Go check out their work on uploadvr.com. Click on their articles, comment on their stories, support if you see new bylines out there,
yeah.
support them just like you support new devs if you can.
For sure. Yeah, I think, as you said, people are asking why we're doing the last discussion at the end. It's a good point, but we want to give it the space it has. So let's really just get through these topics and kind of keep on topic so that we can get to that and just kind of discuss what we have
Yep.
at
What do
hand.
we have next,
Let's
David?
go straight into the Apple section. So, firstly, Apple has released an open source on device AI model called Sharp that instantly turns images into volumetric scenes. So, this basic idea is not new. We talked about last year Marble being a really impressive example of this. If you haven't heard of it, you can go to Marble in your Quest web browser or your Apple Vision Pro's web browser, feed it a single image, and have it turn that into a volumetric scene that you can explore, in Marble's case, in WebXR. But Marble is running server side. It takes a couple of minutes, depending on the scene, maybe 4 to 5 minutes. Apple's model is very interesting because it is on device and almost instant. It is orders of magnitude more efficient. Uh, you can run it on a Mac, for example, and or a Windows PC, and within pretty much a second get a scene out of an image. And this is a .ply file that you can use however you want. So a developer implemented this. It's open source. A developer kind of implemented into their app, and that's what that app that's available on the Vision OS App Store. I was able to try out, and I was very impressed by it. It is interesting that Vision OS 26, the Photos app, already does allow you to turn images into kind of volumetric scenes. Apple even calls them spatial scenes. So we have to actually get kind of very specific about what we mean in these cases. Um, the app is called Splat Studio. If you go into the Vision OS 26 Photos app, it does turn it into a scene in the sense that you can lean your head around and you do get a real sense of parallax, and this all happens in seconds. But it's not something that you can kind of physically walk around and explore. There is a limit to the degrees of, to the kind of exact amount of freedom your head is going to get when you're kind of peering in. So I would describe the Vision OS spatial scenes feature as peering into a scene, whereas the Sharp model is creating kind of a full, much more dense volumetric scene that you can actually explore and kind of walk around. In the specific implementation of Spot Studio, you use your two hands to manipulate it, but that's only one developer's implementation. You could theoretically set it up so you can walk around in room scale. So, if you don't have an Apple Vision Pro, you can go and just try this out on your Windows PC, right? It's an open source model available on GitHub. You can play around with it. If you don't have a Vision Pro, you can still do this. If you do have a Vision Pro, Splat Studio is free on the App Store, and you can try this out. It's quite clear that I see bars. I'm asking, how does Sharp compare to Hyperscape? So these are vastly different in terms of quality. Okay, uh, Hyperscape, you're feeding it hundreds of images. That's what the headset is doing. As you're walking around the scene, it's capturing hundreds of images, and then it takes 4 to 8 hours on Meta's servers to generate a result. This is happening on device in like on the Vision Pro. For me, it took about 20 seconds. So you're talking about one image, 20 seconds. Vastly, vastly different levels. Um, it is not Hyperscape. It is not that quality, but it's very, very impressive. It's clear that this is going to be a fundamental part of all of these XR operating systems. That is going to be a fundamental capability of all of these systems. You're going to be able to, either with the headset's cameras or your smartphone, capture a couple of images or one image of a scene, mostly through an automated process where you kind of just turn your head around and get a very, very high quality output. I think Hyperscape, as it is today, is going to be kind of looked back on as very archaic in the sense of how long it took. 5 to 10 minutes of walking around your house plus this kind of multiple hours on a server. it's quite clear that with the pace of these kind of neurally trained Gaussian splats, we're going to be in a world quite soon where what you get with hyperscape is possible in minutes or seconds, and you can very, very quickly bring a real world scene into virtual reality to then kind of use it as you wish and play around with um, in multiplayer, for example.
Oh, any comments you want to respond to? I'm a little overwhelmed, if I'm being honest, David. I'm trying to operate my Mac and my iPhone here from Horizon Workrooms because I can use iPhone mirroring on my Mac um to bring my work phone into VR. So here's my work phone sitting on this table right here. And then it's mirrored onto my Mac screen, which is virtually right here. Physically, the Mac screen is right here. Virtually,
Sure.
it's right here. So here's my iPhone screen that's pulled up right here, my Mac screen that's been pulled up right here, and my phone isn't working properly inside
But why do
this
you need your phone
window.
in it? Why not just do
Well,
everything on
it's
the Mac?
interesting because, well, why do I need my Mac is another, ask that question first,
Well, no,
right?
that's obvious to have your notes and your articles in the chat, but then why do you need the phone?
Because I would prefer to get my messages through my phone, not my Mac.
But you need to get messages live on while you're doing a podcast?
Uh, no, but if it beeps at me, it would be nice to glance at it and not through the eye hole at the bottom of my
But surely if you're on a podcast,
underneath.
just put it on do not disturb and tell
I
people.
do, yeah. It is on Do Not Disturb. So like I need my Mac for the comments, and I was trying to figure out what like the thing about iPhone mirroring is it's an app now on my Mac. It's almost open all the time. It's inviting me to open it. So in the grand scheme of things, no, I can probably close
It just feels,
the iPhone and just have one device accompanying me, not both. But I did need one of them here.
sure, no, I get the Mac, it's just the iPhone part. I mean, look, if I was on if we were on a physical talk show, it'd feel weird to take your phone out and start reading your messages in the middle of it. And guess that's just my
Well,
feedback to being overwhelmed. Do fewer things just because
you
you
want to know
can. You
why I
don't
was
need to.
overwhelmed here, David? Is I feel like I had to cover my passcode getting typed in to my phone because here's like here I'm holding I'm holding the phone in my hand, right? Can
Yeah,
you can see that?
yes, I would repeat why.
I'm I might need to use my phone, right?
Why in the middle of a podcast would you need to
No,
use
I'm
your phone?
saying in virtual reality, period.
Okay, okay, right. I understand.
In virtual reality period, I need to use my phone, right? I look
Okay.
down at it. It can't unlock me because it can't see my face. So I either have to make a choice here. Do I type in my passcode or do I lift up the headset and let it see my face? So now
Right.
I'm going to hold I've just swiped up to expose the keyboard on my phone, and I'm going to block the back of it so that camera over there can't see me typing in my passcode here on the other side of a physical screen. So like I if I type in my passcode here, they're on that camera over there, they're actually going to see my precision finger movements onto a flat surface
Yeah,
typing in.
I get it.
And if
Yeah.
you wanted to backwards go, oh, let's relay a 9-digit entry pin code onto this, you might be able to work back my passcode across this. So that's why I'm distracted, David. Now I'll put my phone away on this podcast.
Yeah, I understand in general for VR, but I do think the solution for that is just don't use your phone in the middle of a podcast.
Hey,
Uh,
they're saying you had to ask. Okay, I tried to keep us on topic here. Let's move on.
okay, yeah, let's talk about our second Apple topic. So we just talked about this interesting open source on device AI from Apple, which I want to point out what I said at the start of the show. Rare to see this from Apple. You can see that they're trying to integrate into the wider machine learning community, and that means allowing researchers to publish. Apple kind of did have this era where they wanted to keep everything secret, but how all of these companies work is that the researchers want to be free. They want there to be able to publish. It's a huge part of being a researcher in technology. You want to be able to open publish on GitHub and on all of these kind of services and Hugging Face. And so Apple is kind of part of that. So that's interesting to see. I wonder if Apple is going to integrate this into Vision OS 27. Again, we already have the situation where you can peer into a scene, but are we going to see an equivalent of Hyperscape from Apple where I can walk around with my Vision Pro and scan a room in? It's clear that Apple has the same kind of researchers that all of these big tech companies have. Gaussian splatting is huge. It is, I keep saying this, it's doing for 3D reconstruction what LLMs did for chatbots, accelerating it out of science fiction. I think amid some of the darker stuff we're going to talk about later, a very, very promising part of VR right now is just how 3D reconstruction is exploding in terms of capability and cost and speed. And this is something we expect to continue through this year. It is going to be, regardless of what headset you buy, as long as it has some sort of color camera on it, or a color camera add-on, you're going to be able to scan in real world situations, real world environments, and even if you don't have a color camera on your headset, your phone will be able to do it anyway. So,
Ian, you're muted. Looking over. No, this is not the final episode. I told this to our freelancers. I just need to, like, people are so worried. We're gonna keep seeing these comments. Like, I could not be more excited about the future of virtual reality. I just wanted to say that, as to
yeah,
people who want to get to the final episode or final topic. We're excited. I'm excited over the long term,
yeah,
even though short term we're gonna have to discuss some very tough things.
it's difficult to not jump ahead, but I just want to kind of give a little tease of some people are taking 10% layoffs as 100%. Some people have missed 10% layoffs is not 100% layoffs. And the death of VR is once again greatly exaggerated. VR is not dead, very much so not.
All right, what do we got next,
People,
David?
yeah,
I,
let's talk about that next Apple topic. So the Apple Immersive Lakers schedule has been released. This is one of those ones where it is so incredibly conditional of whether you can actually watch these Lakers games. So you kind of reported on this while I was sick, and you kind of, I think, got the information from Apple. My understanding is you have to be in the exact kind of region where you would already be able to get this broadcast. Let's kind of bring up the exact specific conditions here to watch live Apple immersive video of the LA Lakers, is to be clear what we are currently referring to. You need to be in Southern California, Hawaii, and parts of Nevada with Spectrum internet and video, or a subscriber of any Spectrum package that includes Spectrum Sportsnet. That's the condition to watch this live. A lot more people um, can watch this through. It says it also kind of, it's so confusing because they also say users with a free NBA ID will also have access to live games. It's unclear whether that means within the exact same locations. When it comes to full game replays, it's clear that it's actually a much 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 wider uh, set of people. I think it's anyone within the United States can watch these games afterwards, anywhere actually where Apple Vision Pro is sold, but that's 24 hours after each game. When it comes to the live broadcasts, again, they're so vague about this, but it does appear that you need to be in these very specific broadcast regions, and it's so early, right? One thing I want to
yeah,
constantly keep repeating about VR in general, and I still maintain this, is that we're still incredibly, incredibly early. This is the 2020s is still, the early decade for VR. We're literally just at the point where we're getting the first high quality stereoscopic 3D broadcasts on modern headsets. And it's got all these conditions. We will be in a world in the 2030s where your favorite sport will be broadcast this way and there won't be all of these different conditions. Right now, it is kind of like, the very early days of broadcast TV where there were all of these same kind of restrictions.
yeah, and recall. Okay, so the context to bring here is Next VR. Not everyone has this context, so I have to kind of repeat it every time this topic comes up. But the Lakers game, the first Lakers game, was broadcast live last Friday evening at 7 p.m. I ended up watching, I think, Tron Ares that night in headset with James in our audience, if James is out there. He's tuned in remotely in his Apple Vision Pro. And my son is sitting right next to me watching Tron Ares on my iPhone. So I've got him watching Tron Ares here physically, sat right next to me. James is out there remotely in his Vision Pro, and we are all tuned in to the Disney Plus subscriptions we've paid for to watch Tron Ares over 2 hours. It was fantastic experience, cinematic experience. I won't say it was a fantastic movie. It was a fun movie. Um, but that was the night that Apple premiered the first live broadcast of a live LA Lakers game to this limited scenario, this limited group of people. And the thing about it is, it felt like deja vu to a degree I hadn't really seen before. All of this has happened before. All of it will happen again. Next VR in the 2010s now, when you start putting things on this time scale that you just put it on, um, they had a full schedule of next VR of broadcast games in the exact same format. Now we call it Apple Immersive, but back then it was non-branded that way. It was 180-degree 3D stereoscopic media, and they were capturing it at such a quality that everyone who went to one of those Lakers games back in the 2010s said, "There's something here. There's something really wonderful. You can go. There's a track record on our own website and littered across other parts of the internet. That's the thing. There's a lot of things in our on uploadvr.com in our 10 years of URLs that are only on uploadvr.com on the timestamps that they are because one of us chose to cover it that day. But with next VR broadcasts, you'll find them littered all across the internet, reviews of people going to these Laker games and going, yeah, that was really, really cool. You'll find threads on Reddit even um, remembering what it was like. And we're talking about headsets that are like the Oculus Go and the Gear VR and maybe the first Quest that the next VR broadcasts were streaming on. And so, like, some of the worst headsets than we will ever have, right? Like, worst headsets than today, were the headsets people were having on their heads in the 2010s. And they're going, wow, this is really great. They they built up a schedule and they repeated this very same practice of limit before they built up the schedule. They did this practice of like, okay, let's only allow these games to be to logged into users. Let's only have a few games to logged in users. Okay, the next year there was more games available to stream. The next year they tried to, as I recall, they tried to like rip off all the restrictions they possibly could, and it just turned out there wasn't the business that they needed to support what they were trying to do in the 2010s. They got bought by Apple, and that technology has been reborn as Apple Immersive. So, what we've seen here is Apple taking the technology, shining it and polishing it for a couple of years, and then releasing it as part of what they were trying to do with Apple Vision Pro. And significantly, it wasn't even the biggest part of the launch of Apple Vision Pro. Here we are more than a year into the launch of this ecosystem, and they're just now getting around to doing live sports. And the reactions are, it's like you saw people that saw the future in the 2010s experiencing the future in the 2020s, but it's still too expensive. Like, we all know that.
Sure. So it's definitely notable that this was done in the 2010s, but I don't think it is just a case of slightly polishing it up. You're saying it was 180 degree in 3D. Yes, absolutely true. But it was at significantly lower resolution. I think it was around 4K versus the current 8K. I think it was 60 FPS versus the current 90. It lacked the high dynamic range. Don't think spatial audio. We've said this before. I think that 180-degree video was an interesting novelty back then, but it just hadn't crossed the quality threshold. Sure, people were impressed in the sense of, wow, this is cool. But was the resolution good enough that you would actually want to sit there and watch a match like that, a full match at the exact amount of time? I don't think so. I don't actually think the technology was ready yet. Now we come to 10 years later and the technology is just about good enough, but it's still not mass market kind of good enough. It's just good enough to do these early trials. We still probably do need to see, more resolution, and you do need to see maybe 270 degrees. You do need to see the ability to kind of watch these alongside people. But It is a
I have one
promising
more
start.
thing to use. You also need to use all that space more effectively for broadcasts, right? Like the broadcasts include the scoreboard, I believe, and a couple other things, and you can switch between the camera angles. But using that space around you in different ways to like if you're behind the scoreboard, uh if you're behind the backboard, you might want the scoreboard over here, or you might want to customize where the scoreboard is. That's all stuff that they still have to work out
Sure.
software-wise for this broadcast format in every single sport.
Sure. I do think it's at the point where it's relatively compelling, and it is just a case of scaling it up, you know? At this point, it'll be interesting to see whether Meta wants to, compete in the same sphere. We do know that they do have that partnership with James Cameron's Lightstorm Vision to try to bring more 3D content that could include immersive. I think it very much so is a watch this space. I want to see when we're having the same discussion a year from now, how much is this rolled out? Some of it will just need to wait for these lightweight headsets, though. That is a huge trend that we expect to see happen over the next couple of years. To see these headsets that we have today that are 500-gram face bricks significantly shrink down into being, 100 to 150-gram visors connected to lightweight kind of compute pucks. That is something that we know it's Meta's next headset is planned to be that. Pico's next headset. It's very likely that we'll see an Android XR competitor as well. And this is one of those things where I think, as well as all the things you just said, and as well as the actual stream quality being good, you need the headset to be lightweight and comfortable. So we're still seeing the pieces come together. This is why I always kind of laugh when I hear people kind of talk about VR in the past tense. We're still seeing the fundamental pieces of what's needed to make this an appealing wide market consumer technology actually fall into place. We're still in the early days. The Quest 3 we're using today is from 2023 and we're in 2026. We're still, talking about a headset that doesn't even have eye tracking, that is built around controllers as the fundamental input mechanism. It'll be interesting to see once we are in a world where you can get an affordable, lightweight headset that streams your favorite sport live, what does consumer adoption look like then?
And that's really interesting. And I we're gonna have to get into it at some point, but I imagine a $1,500 Apple mainline headset somewhere in that range, and it drops the eyesight cameras on the outside, does something else to somehow cut weight. I don't know, but you when you buy it, you get a 3 month subscription to Apple TV Plus, and with that you get NBA on court access. And the thing that I just said, NBA on court, that's a significant thing. That's that is better than courtside. And it's something that was important to express in our write-ups about this. And it's something that Apple is legitimately trying to offer here. On field, on court, on pitch, whatever your sport is, on ice, they can literally take you there with virtual reality, with Apple Immersive is what they call it. Um, but you can be there fully immersed in this wide field of view until even though you're right, like it can get better and it should get better for mass markets of billions of people in a few years. The on ramp still might be quick, is what I'm wondering if hardware prices can get anywhere, but like we've had these two extremes, I guess. We've had a compelling product at $3,500 and a compelling product at $500, but it missed so many of these key like
But both
reasons to keep going into it. And that's our last discussion still though, right?
Sure, but both of them are half a kilogram, right? Even the $500 or $3,500, most people just don't find
It's
that
price and
comfortable.
weight, right? It's
It's
both.
price and weight,
Okay.
yes.
Okay.
Capability on the Quest side, and then price and weight. So you're talking about what Apple would do to reduce weight. It's the same strategy as Meta and Pico are going to take in all the other manufacturers. You have a very low power chip on board the headset that processes the computer vision and pass through, because that needs to be done locally because you've got massive sensor bandwidth. You've got to process the hand tracking, the position tracking, and the pass through locally. Trying to send all that bandwidth over a cable is stupid. And then you have the high power chip in a tethered compute puck. It's going to Apple's kind of already introduced the expectation to the consumer that you will have something tethered. It's just that that's not going to be the battery. I would expect Apple to follow the same strategy as the rest of the industry.
Um, well, so we'll see how it goes. We're going to move on to the meta glasses section, and I'm going to speak to Anti-Cleric's comment I saw somewhere up there where he said he was going to take a nap until the later part of the show when we get into the good stuff. Well, okay, look, I that was a pretty focused discussion, relatively speaking, for Upload VR and VR Download, about things we do in VR and things relevant to VR. Now we're going to talk about meta glasses. We're gonna
Sure.
exit VR here. This is the time you take your snooze if you're a VR person, right, David?
Yep. If that's something that doesn't interest you, sure. But let's just get through it rather than kind of meta talking about it. No pun intended. Let's just talk about it. So, firstly, we have three topics here to talk about on the meta glasses. We're just going to get it out of the way really quickly. Um, firstly, they are rolling out in early access conversation focus. Early access means you need to be in the US and Canada and enroll in the early access program. If you do so, you get some features. The first one we're talking about here, and we're going to briefly talk about it, is conversation focus. It's something that Meta has been researching for years. Ian was reporting on it from Meta's research, what was it, 4 or 5 years ago now? And the idea here is you can either say, hey, Meta, start conversation focus, or you can map it to the long press of the touchpad on the side of the glasses. The latter there would seem much more practical. Let's say you've set that up for your long press. You hold it down in the glasses, you hold down the side of the glasses, and now the person's voice in front of you is being amplified in your ears. You're getting an audio feed into your ear of only the person in front of you. And these glasses have, all of these meta glasses have a 5 microphone array that they're able to kind of positionally pick out the audio in front of you. It's an accessibility use case for people hard of hearing, such that if you're in a loud environment, such as a cafe, you can hear the person in front of you. So there's not much we want to say about this, but I think it's an interesting accessibility feature that a lot of people may find useful. Um, and so, if you are someone who is hard of hearing and you find it difficult to hear people, that's an interesting accessibility feature. I don't think there's much else to say about this one.
Yeah, the conversation focus and then the neural band handwriting is the one we've got coming up next. So we should just move right into it because those are the ones that were kind of teased years ago, as you kind of alluded to, and now Meta is forcing them out into the world at the fastest possible rate that they can manage.
Yep. So the next topic is about the neural band. So again, this is early access. So that means United States and Canada only, and you have to enroll in the early access program. Anyone can enroll as long as you're in the US and Canada. So they're rolling out the handwriting recognition that was teased when the Meta glasses, the Meta Ray-Ban display glasses was announced. So right now, if someone sends you a text message on WhatsApp or SMS or Instagram or Messenger, uh, and it pops up as a notification in your Meta glasses. I'm going to keep just saying Meta glasses for Meta Ray-Ban display glasses. You use the Meta Neural Band to either middle finger tap to ignore it, that's the go away, swipe away, or single index finger tap to open it. Now, say you want to reply. You will see suggested replies. You can swipe along using the kind of thumb to index finger gesture to pick a suggested reply. You can alternatively record a voice message. All of these platforms support it, just a voice message. Or the most common one that I would be using all the time would be dictation. So I click dictate, I speak the message I want to respond to this person, and on device, it actually does the voice transcription. That's okay for some situations, especially if you're at home or in an environment that kind of you're comfortable dictating, but quite often you're not, and you want a different text entry system. So this handwriting um, recognition allows you to swipe the letters that you want to enter for text entry. So instead of having to say anything out loud, you're swiping your index finger against any surface, which can include your leg, your thigh, and then you can type. This is something we haven't been able to try. We're going to look into trying to figure out how to try it. Obviously, we're not in the United States early access program. We'll see if Meta can roll that out to us. Regardless, people who have tried it so far say it works very well, but we want to try that out ourselves. It's a really sort of much more um, rich usage of surface electromyography, SEMG technology. Right now, when you go back to the Meta Ray Ban review, I'm talking about how you're doing these kind of swiping and tapping gestures. This is significantly going a lot further than that. This is interpreting the actual letters that your finger is tracing out. So that's really just by far the most advanced uses of SEMG we've seen in any consumer product whatsoever. That's beyond what anyone else has shipped. I think even you could argue even in kind of medical products, no one has done something with that level of precision. So we really want to try that out and see how well it works.
And I want to try it on my VR headset, which is has that been confirmed? Has that been announced? Is that going to happen? Or am I going to be able to connect the current Meta neural band to a Quest headset?
Meta has said no plans for that. They have no plans for that.
What a miss. What a miss. And that's the critical way I want to use it. Like it would be so neat to kind of just do this and get back to playing a VR game. To send a quick message.
So yeah, but I think if you actually something we're going to report on soon that Luna found in the Horizon OS code is that Meta plans to ship something a lot better if you have a Surface available, which is virtual Surface keyboard. So according to Luna's data mining, Luna being a friend of UploadVR that has written some articles for us before, you're going to be able to turn a physical surface, we're talking about Quest here, using computer vision and hand tracking into a virtual keyboard. That would be a lot better, I think, than swiping letters on your wrist. So I continue to think that sure, it would be kind of cool to see meta neuroband supported on Quest, but actually you just don't need it anywhere near as much as you do on glasses. And already you have hand tracking on Quest that allows you to do a lot of these things without it. Sure, it would help in some ways, but keep in mind it's not free. You have you're I think you're having a
Oh
mental
yeah.
model here where every Quest owner gets sent a band. It's a $200 product. And is there $200 worth of value there? I don't think so for Quest owners.
Yeah, totally get that. We should probably just move right on to the next one here pretty soon. But the delay of the international plan is the other part of this news that we kind of got to cover. So they were very confident that they were going to get it out to you. So what I'm kind of hinting at there is I have a neural band here sitting on a table. David has a pair of glasses that I sent to him. Meta sent to him a neural band, right? So
Yeah.
you have the set, you have the display glasses and the neural band. I have the neural band with no display glasses to send to it, and the early access program for testing this feature is only available in the United States.
Well,
Well, sorry.
we do
Go ahead.
believe we can get enrolled in it. We don't want to make any promises, but I think Meta's indicated they will be able to enroll me in it.
All to say that Meta has changed its plans over international rollout here since December when we made these plans of shipping this hardware internally on all these ways, and now, right? They've changed and
Yeah.
delayed their international rollout.
Yeah, that's correct. So alongside rolling out this handwriting recognition, they say that they're no longer planning to imminently launch in Europe. They were going to in the United Kingdom, in Italy, and in France, as well as Canada, actually. So they are now launching. They're keeping their plan to just expand the United States availability. They claim that this is due to unprecedented demand. They are claiming that the Meta Ray-Ban display as a product has significantly outsold what they had planned it to sell, or they expected it to sell, I guess is a better way to say that. And so they need to catch up with the United States orders. If you look at the back orders for this product in terms of arranging even just a appointment, it's well into 2026 now. There's a months of delay. And if you want prescriptions, it's months and months and months of delays. So it doesn't really make sense when you are trying to catch up in one country, the United States, to then start launching in others. They need to prioritize their stock. And so I think some of this is just down to these first generation waveguides, first generation in the sense of being in a mass market consumer product, are actually just very difficult to manufacture. There are production capacity limits. This is a story of Meta smart glasses in general, and I think that actually brings us really well onto our next topic. If you're fine to kind of move on to it, which is um, that Meta and EssilorLuxottica, according to Bloomberg, are discussing doubling or tripling their smart glasses production capacity. So um, this is for all of the smart glasses, to be clear, not just the display glasses. The story of Meta's Reality Labs success in 2025 has been at each earnings call, they tell investors Quest headset sales are down and the smart glasses sales are skyrocketing. They have repeatedly said to investors, both Meta and EssilorLuxottica, EssilorLuxottica being the owner of Ray-Ban and Oakley, just in case you're unaware, these companies have both told their investors repeatedly that they are selling the smart glasses as fast as they can make them. And we're not talking about the display glasses here. We're talking about the regular Ray-Ban Meta glasses. They have been production constrained. You can see this if you go to order a lot of the models on Meta's website. A lot of them just say out of stock. I constantly look at them. A lot of them constantly say, back ordered. And so around a year ago, EssilorLuxottica told investors that it had planned to scale up production to 10 million annual units by the end of 2026. And so Bloomberg is reporting that they are now talking about doubling that to 20 million annual units by the end of this year, as in that's the production capacity. And they're even discussing the possibility of tripling it to 30 million annual production units. So the ramp up here, the scale up we've seen in these smart glasses has just been dramatic. It has been to the point where these things went from selling like the same as Quest to just scaling up far beyond it. Quest 2 sold, 20 million units over multiple years. And now Meta is already talking about at minimum doing that per year by the end of this year for the smart glasses. So this kind of moves us on to our next topic. I'll just kind of briefly say this in a way. Everything that you're seeing happening at Meta in terms of VR is coming alongside this. They are a business. They are seeing fewer people buy their Quest headsets, and they are seeing way, 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 way more people buying their smart glasses to the point where they are limited solely by production at this point. Meanwhile, the Quests, they are not limited by production. They can pump out Quest 3S easily. It is not a difficult to manufacture product. It is a very easy to manufacture product. It is using lenses that are now 8 years old. It is using, a Qualcomm chipset that is easy to mass produce at this point. It's using a single display panel. Quest 3S they can pump those things out as fast as they need to, but people aren't buying it. So that's the kind of dichotomy at Meta right now, and that kind of brings us into our final discussion about what's happening with VR.
Oh my goodness. Hello everyone that's been tuning in. I'm seeing, who is it? F Meister just tuned into us and they're catching up to us at chipmunk speed. So those are the people that we are trying to make space for when we do the show this way by leaving the big subjects to the end. We're trying to give people like F Meister space to catch up. So thank you for tuning in today. Thank you to everyone who tunes in to Upload VR and VR Download. Let's just talk about Meta closing Twisted Pixel, Armature, and Sanzaru games first. That's the first big headline that we were able to produce. We knew these layoffs were coming. Everyone I think knew for months now that it was coming in some way, shape, or form. The question was, what is the exact shape? And so, David, can you run us through that shape for us real quick?
Yeah. So, firstly, what you're saying about months ago, yeah, that is true. Around a month ago now, around 6 weeks ago, we had multiple news outlets like the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg, Business Insider, a whole bunch saying that Meta was planning to do a kind of layoff or reduction in funding and budget for its VR business. Then, around 4 weeks ago, a month ago, Meta officially made a statement to us, to everyone, saying that they were going to reallocate some resources from VR and metaverse towards wearables, which at Meta means smart glasses. Wearables is smart glasses. So that was something that they'd officially confirmed, a month ago. That was on the record, public statement, not just speculation. And now we're seeing the first fruits of that. So, uh, according to the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, around 10% of Meta Reality Labs has been laid off. That's Meta Reality Labs is a roughly 15,000 person division. So we're talking about around 1,500 people getting laid off. 10% of Reality Labs being the AR, VR, and wearables and smart glasses and Horizon division of Meta. Okay. Like Instagram, WhatsApp, and Facebook, that's the main part of Meta. Reality Labs is the everything else, the stuff that we talk about on this show. 10% of it laid off. Now, that has included, we've been reporting this week, Twisted Pixel, Armature, and Sanzaru games in their entirety. Twisted Pixel being the developer of Deadpool VR, as well as, they had past stuff like Defector and Wilson's Heart, if you remember back then. Armature has also been entirely closed. They did the Resident Evil 4 VR port for Quest 2, and Sanzaru Games has also been shut down, who developed, Asgard's Wrath and Asgard's Wrath 2. All of these studios also has developed some smaller stuff, but we're talking about kind of the big blockbuster titles. So three of those. I see someone saying you can tell I'm already out of breath. I'm trying so hard not to cough right now. I just spend my days coughing all day long. Deeply frustrating. Those three studios have been completely closed down. Additionally, we reported today that Camouflage, the developer of Batman Arkham Shadow, has seen significant layoffs. So it is being gutted. So it's not closed down, but essentially it is. Our understanding is that they're going to work on stuff that is not VR games. They're not working on VR games anymore. Additionally, the Batman Arkham Shadow sequel has been cancelled. It was actually being worked on by Sanzaru, the Asgard's Wrath 2 developer. It is cancelled. It is dead. And finally, the other thing that we reported and kind of Ian noted seeing from the Facebook group is that Supernatural, Meta's US only VR fitness subscription service, will no longer get new content or features. So these layoffs have significantly focused on Meta's first party content for Quest. This is a company that is no longer going to continue its strategy, which it was unique in the market of doing, which was to pump billions of dollars into content that it never really expected to get a return on directly. The purpose of all this content was to sell Quest headsets. You know that because some of this wasn't even sold, right? Batman Arkham Shadow was bundled with Quest 3 and 3S. So the first thing I just want to say on this is like people saying that like, oh, it's because it didn't sell well enough. Well, Batman Arkham Shadow was given out for free with every headset, so it's nothing to do with that. Asgard's Wrath 2 was given out for free as well for a long time. These were marketing expenses. And again, looking back at this 2025 thing, they sold fewer Quest headsets in 2025 than in 2024. Your Meta, your business, I'm presenting their kind of perspective here. You spend billions of dollars funding content to sell headsets, and you sell fewer headsets. This is where you get to this decision where they decide we're not going to do this anymore. We can discuss later, or you can get into it right now if you want, why people are buying fewer headsets, but I'm just kind of setting out the scenario here. People bought fewer Quest headsets in 2025 than they did in 2024. That's how you get to where we are today.
Yeah. So I'm looking at our comments. I see Mighty Coconut, the creators of Walkabout Mini Golf, have tuned in to say that they love our new looks, by the way. And then Windfire, all that kind, replied, "Dear Lucas," that'd be Lucas Martel over there at Mighty Coconut, "never, ever, ever allow Meta to buy you out, ever." So I appreciate those comments right there. We just premiered the tour of their new Tiki Akoko course over on our channel right before we came here into the studio. You can go find my write-up. Honestly, pretty proud of that write-up. If you go check out the story that I kind of unearthed there on my tour inside virtual reality, and then you can see the kind of story that I was able to tell from hearing that on the tour over on UploadVR.com. Yeah, I don't know if I want to get into it just yet. All my thoughts here. Do you want to move on to the next closures before I take us off the rails?
I mean, I think I listed them out there. That's Twisted Pixel, Armature, and Sanzaru, Supernatural, and Camouflage. So I think that
Okay,
is
we got them all.
yeah.
Okay, well,
It's these first party studios. So I think maybe we'll finish that by just saying what is still there in our understanding. Pretty much it's Beat Saber and Population One. So these are both live service games. Beat Saber, our understanding, is still in development. It will still get content on Quest and Steam. And
Meta.
Population One, we don't really know the situation there, but there's no indication. We'll put it. Let's be very careful worded. There's no indication that Population One or Beat Saber are closing.
Um, those both seem like great free-to-play services for a Horizon service that still has yet to launch. I always I always get the sense that Meta makes the right decisions on the wrong timelines.
You want to expand on that?
Um, I think the Gemini AI. There are so many comments on UploadVR.com on our articles for this. In particular, the meta layoffs, meta closing Twisted Pixel, Armature, Sanzaru. There are people still actually arguing in those comments, like while we speak, about the this nature of the market. And I got a Google Gemini summary of the discussion in those chats because there's so many things happening in that chat now trying to talk about it. And one of Google Gemini's summaries raised up from the comments was the cyclical nature of Meta's decision making, and it's always like they're trying to move so fast, but they're chasing the wrong things at the wrong times, the wrong signals at the wrong times. So yeah, Quest headsets or sales are down, but what is the overarching trend in virtuality? Yeah, it's up. Well, yeah, so they're making this like the moment you bought Beat Saber, why didn't they turn it free to play then? If that's the path that Beat Saber goes on, I'm sorry to Beat Saber fans who love their game being expensive. I don't know. Um, but like if that's the end goal, let's get Beat Saber to everyone.
Well,
That is our one must-have location in virtuality. Also, the other one is the best version of Fortnite that we can manage inside virtuality. We're gonna hook those both up to the Horizon ecosystem, and you can get them from Horizon Central, and that's our last hope for Horizon Worlds. That would, if I was an executive at Meta, that would be what I would do, but I would have done it 3 years ago.
so when it comes to Beat Saber, people are buying it. It's consistently in the top selling Quest games. It remains the top selling VR game of all time across all platforms, right? It is the highest selling. People are still buying it. It's if you're Meta, Beat Saber is so popular and so successful, we almost take it for granted. It's become kind of like the background radiation of VR, where we don't bring it up enough because it's just so we're so used to it. We've been playing it for
Background
almost a decade now.
radiation of VR, I
But
love it.
a lot of people buy a Quest headset, and Beat Saber is the only game they ever buy. That's what I'm saying. So I don't think they need to make that kind
Oh,
of
wait,
free to
David,
play.
I gotta respond to that because I think you're right, but also the behaviors you just described is true of hundreds of thousands of probably 10 or 15 niches inside PCVR, each of them being about 100,000 or 50,000 people. So you got 10 games adding up to millions, maybe, of
Right.
people who are obsessed with these worlds. And that is the one world they go to virtual reality to experience. Microsoft Flight Simulator, No Man's Sky. You and I can go down the list, right, of the ones that fit this scenario. You put on a headset, you go there on a weekend. Weekend getaway. That was one of my headlines here that I can't remember if it actually got published, but VR headsets are weekends getaways for millions of people when you start adding up all the concurrents coming in and out all the time. So it's significant in that sense, and they exist inside these verticals. And you described it as background radiation. When the Beat Saber founders sold Beat Saber, Beat Games to Meta, they put golden handcuffs on their wrists that attached them to Meta for the duration of them receiving stock units, probably. I'm just theorizing. I haven't actually looked at their agreements. But for a period of a couple years there, they're getting loads and loads and loads of money to sort of hand off Beat Saber to the Meta ecosystem. So here's the that's what happens generally in founding overall. You sell your company to Meta, here's what happens. You get a lot of money and you stay on for a little while to help the transition happen. That period happened, that clock started ticking. I want to say it was 2018 was when they made that first major acquisition of Beat Games and said, we're putting our mark in the sand on this. The only thing Beat Saber has done since then is add a few gameplay elements, like different types of notes,
Mhm.
and DLC pack after DLC pack after DLC pack after DLC pack. And meanwhile, Meta launches Horizon Worlds, where we go, you got to get tokens to play the games, and you got to do a whole different bunch of things. Meanwhile, there was this period of like the founders have left, right? That they've
Sure.
gone. They're no longer interested. They got their bag. um, and what are you doing with Beat Saber? Well, like now they're trying to do something with Beat Saber. Is what you want them to do to Beat Saber require you log into a Meta account to get your songs?
Well,
Like, is that
you
what you
don't need
need to
to.
do?
Beat Saber's still on Steam. You can still. I mean, look, Beat Saber is one of the few successes of Meta's acquisitions. Okay, I think they're in a it ain't broke, don't fix it. They don't want to go and make it part of Horizon. It works. Like I keep saying, people buy Beat Saber. It's always in the top five and even I think top three most selling Quest games, and people buy the DLCs. It really is it. If you don't it ain't broke, don't fix it. I don't think anyone at Meta should touch Beat Saber. Just let them keep on keeping on because it's a success story, right? People want to play Beat Saber. It's incredibly popular. I want to say this again. It remains the number one best-selling VR game of all time. So I wouldn't mess with that formula personally. Um, but obviously, what's happened here? There's two kind of games that are kind of working in VR, and it is these, Beat Saber because you can jump in so quickly. It's not you don't need to do a 6 hour session. You can just jump in and play it. It's more like um, it's hard to explain what I'm trying to say. It's more like just a quick, casual mobile game that you would jump into. Uh, then you also have these kind of social experiences that are working. It's really strange that Meta has actually spent so long, when you think about it, making these single player blockbuster VR games, right? Your Batman Arkham Shadow, your Asgard's Wrath 2, your uh, your Deadpool VR. If you had tried to guess what would Meta be making, it would be, your Horizon multiplayer token experiences, but it hasn't actually been that. So if anything, it's quite strange that it went on for so long, but it was always a marketing expense. No one at Meta thought that these games were ever going to make their money back. Um, I think, look, at some point, I want to bring up the Steam frame thing here because one thing I find so bizarre. Let's just get into the controversy. So bizarre here is for people to go, damn. It sucks that Meta has shut down these studios. Meta's evil for doing this. I'm gonna go buy a Steam frame. Valve save us. When really all this is Meta doing the Valve strategy of put out hardware and let other developers build games for it. Valve released one game 6 years ago and then nothing since. Meta is going to regress to the same thing. Meta is no longer going to be making blockbuster VR games. That is quite clear. They are going to sell you the headset and you can go and buy their existing games, right? They're not going to take, Batman Arkham Shadow off the store. You can go buy it if you want. But in terms of new games, that's going to come from a third party ecosystem. And in some ways, that's going to be a lot healthier. But in other ways, it's going to kind of mean that there is less
It,
direct appeal for new headsets. But it wasn't working anyway. People weren't. But I keep needing to say this over again because we need to remember this is the fundamental reality. Fewer people bought a headset in 2025 than in 2024. So none of this worked. But if you thought of this from an outside perspective, right? You didn't know anything about the VR market. You didn't know what games existed, and someone said, "Well, they're going to make a Batman game, a Deadpool game, and a giant 60-hour RPG." You'd think, "Well, there you go. That's what gamers want." They'll kind of jump in, but it's not working. And what do you do when a strategy's not working? You shift strategy.
so Anti-Cleric speaking up, he has woken up from his nap and popped in to say that there's no money in VR games, though. That's the difference between Meta and Valve. So I'm going to respond to some of these comments here and say that for 10 years here, Meta has tried to make fetch happen. And fetch happen is not virtual reality. But virtual reality was happening long before Meta spent $2 billion or $3 billion on Oculus.
Well,
It's a it's a it was
happening. What do you mean by happening? It was
it's a
maybe
scientific concept that is studied by researchers for decades.
sure, but wait. This is when we use the word VR. Are we saying VR as a technology or VR as a market? The analogy I always make here is that electric cars existed in the 1890s, and I want to say again, 1890s, not 1990s. They existed. There were electric cars actually before internal combustion engine cars, but did that matter in a market sense? No, it didn't matter until the 2010s when you saw, the Tesla Model S and the Tesla Model 3 and Y. Sure, VR has existed, that we can go through the history, the Sword of Damocles, the 1960s, the, NASA projects in the 1980s. But what matters in terms of like a business sense and in a consumer market sense is when does it exist as an actual consumer technology? And no, VR did not exist as a consumer technology before Oculus.
Uh, but it wasn't the same thing as the metaverse prior to 2012. So, virtual reality is being studied in labs. The metaverse is being read in books. That, but prior to 2012 is what I want. The critical difference I want to talk about here. And when Mark Zuckerberg went to the VR labs at the time, he went to Stanford VR. This is fairly clearly reported. He went to Stanford VR and tried out the best of what they offered. And then he went to Oculus and he started courting them and buying. He did some research for a few months or something for some period, and then he came back and very swiftly dropped $3 billion on these founders and said, "Let's make Oculus
Well,
VR happen for a decade, and let's invest tens of billions of
he tried the
dollars in
Valve
this."
room. He tried
What?
he tried the Valve room, and then he went and hired all the people from Valve that built the Valve room, and then brought them to
Yes,
Oculus. Yes.
yes, a wonderful piece. I love that piece getting added by you there, David. So what I want to say is that I have heard Mark Zuckerberg repeatedly say this line: personal computing should be centered on people. He says it like he just says it. It's so ridiculous how often he says it. Um, he wants personal computing centered on Meta. That's what the purchase was meant to do. It was the beginning of them trying to make that bet. We need the world to need Meta in personal computing the same way they need Apple and Microsoft and Google. That's what Oculus's purchase was about in 2012. And here's what I want to say after 10 years of effort of trying to make Meta a part of our personal computing. I don't need it, except for one thing. I need it for WhatsApp to contact people internationally.
Yeah, no, you're
That's
right
that.
to say the reason that Meta acquired or that Facebook acquired Oculus in 2014 was that Mark Zuckerberg saw virtual reality technology and said, it's clear that this is going to be the next platform. I would like Meta to be one of the platform holders this time and not just an app, right? That is absolutely indisputable. Yes. Like whether you can become a platform holder without having the existing mobile ecosystem is an open question. You could argue that Amazon successfully has done it with the Echo line of devices, the Echo speakers and the Fire TV and Fire tablet and things like that. Amazon is probably the greatest analogy we can use here. I still would repeat my line that it's far too early to know. I still think Zuckerberg and many other people, myself included, were far, far too optimistic about how long it would actually take to get to spatial computing, AR and VR as a appealing consumer technology. The technology required. I've said this many times before. It feels like an alternate timeline where somebody tried really, really hard to make an iPhone in the 1990s. And it doesn't matter if you poured the entire world GDP into making an iPhone in the 90s, it wasn't going to happen. At some point, you can't do it, right? There's just fundamentally the core technology that bubbles up through fundamental research into kind of industry early trials into mass production and out into the world. It wasn't there. And it's still not there. We still don't have the technology to make appealing headsets. We need to firstly shrink them down, but they also need to get much, much better, right? We're still only covering half of the human field of view, a quarter of resolution. We don't even have very focal brightness. We're orders of magnitude off what the human eye can see in brightness and contrast. We're still using these very, very primitive headsets. And then we're saying, oh, we're in the past tense VR field or VR hasn't worked. It's to me, it's as silly as saying that personal computing didn't work in 1992, right? It's like, well, yeah, because you still have, these megahertz CPUs with megabyte scale floppy disks on these, low resolution giant CRT screens. We don't have internet speeds fast enough to stream, video over it yet. This is a long, long burn, a very long burn. And I think if you had told Mark Zuckerberg in 2014 how long it would take, maybe he wouldn't have bothered, or maybe he would have invested on a much lower scale. It doesn't matter how much money you try to throw into making an iPhone in the 1990s. You can't make an iPhone in the 1990s.
I've been thinking while you've been talking about how to express this. It's so difficult. I'm going to say that Mark Zuckerberg failed to make himself a necessary part of virtual reality.
I mean, it depends what you mean by necessary. Like, let's put the context
Yeah.
here.
I
Meta
tried to be
remains
careful with my wording. I
sure.
like you went straight for the word
Well,
yeah.
I mean, we have to keep remembering the wider context here, and you forget the air we breathe in. You know, the fish doesn't know that it's in water. Meta remains by far the largest VR platform, and likely will when we're having this discussion at the end of next year. You know, sometimes we talk about this in the past tense as if, you know, Meta has any serious competitors in VR. It doesn't. No one has succeeded in making a mass market appealing VR product yet. Like, it's not just Meta. No one has done it. PlayStation VR 2, let's be honest, it has not at all achieved what Sony had hoped for it. You even had Shui on, that podcast a couple of months ago, apologizing for its failure. Uh, if you look at PC VR, it has hovered around 2% of Steam. It's actually, I looked at the latest chart earlier. I took in the latest December figures. It's declined. It is the trend line that we had for years that was ever so slightly up. It is now pointing downwards, and that's whether you filter out Chinese users or not. So PC VR hasn't worked. PC gamers don't want VR. Um, Pico, we know what happened there, right? They had this dramatic plan to come in and be the other company and, compete with Meta in Europe, and they had all their games funding. We had the same thing happen in Pico. They had Pico Studios. Remember, they were making a Beat Saber competitor and Just Dance VR, and they canceled it all. So ByteDance failed, Sony failed, uh, PCVR, you could argue that's one in particular, but Valve, I guess, is the platform holder there, right? Steam VR has failed to become a meaningful part of Steam beyond 2%. Uh, it's like this is the thing I'm saying. I just think we're a lot earlier for VR in general. And people keep wanting there to be this cool savior that's going to come in and magically just grow the market out of nowhere. And I think people are going to be massively disappointed if they think Steam Frame is going to arrive and just start selling tens of millions of units and destroy Quest. But even this idea that we're in a zero sum world where if someone came out with a great VR headset right now that started to sell 10 million units a year, they would be selling into the billions of people who haven't got VR at all yet, right? It's like we're, there's more room to grow than there is to fight. I don't think that anyone who was successfully making a new product would be taking away from Quest. They would be expanding in to markets that haven't even got yet. I just want to keep repeating this, and I apologize if we are at the point where I'm a drinking game meme at this point, but we are so early. And when you're using the headsets of the 2030s and the 2040s, it's going to be so obvious in hindsight how early we were when we look at these 500-gram face bricks with primitive lenses in front of LCD screens without eye tracking, and all of it's going to seem silly in time. I saw someone in the comments say like, um, was were computers not good enough in the early 90s? Of course they weren't. Look at the adoption curve. Look at it. Go Google it right now. I really wish we were in our studio so I could bring up the image, but I can't. But look at the adoption curve for personal computing. It was nothing, 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 and then it hits an S curve in the late 1990s once you see the internet and LCD screens start to become a thing and processors get fast enough that you can do multimedia over the internet. All of these things become, possible to put into laptops that aren't terrible. If you looked at this in the late 80s or the early 90s, you would say personal computing has failed. And I can link you 15 articles where people wrote in the late 80s and 90s saying personal computing has failed. The dream of a computer in every home is just a fantasy. It's all over. It's not wanted. I think we're still in this era where we're going to think like this. Every technologist was wrong about how quickly this technology would advance. It is going to be a long, long, long slog.
I disagree. Um,
With what? With what?
yeah. um, I think there's room for a hero device in the VR market still. I think the Quest wasn't it. I think there's still a hero device that can spawn a. So let me contextualize a couple things. I remember Bosworth saying publicly that he thought that immersive media had reached its S curve, or it had started reaching its breakaway point. And that was right around the launch of the Quest 2. And then he also, when I spoke to him face to face, when they were showing off the Orion glasses to a developer, but not to me, and I was in the room, invited by the developer to film that situation. Bosworth walks into the room, surprised that I'm there, says, "Oh, but by any means, by hook or by crook." But he also says, I get one question in with him in this moment, and he says, he claims to believe the market for VR will be adopt more like the PC, and the market for AR will be adopted more like the phone. That's all he said, as I recall. Like I'm paraphrasing it from the top of my head, so I might have misconstrued it a little bit, but I think that's a really good summation of what he was trying to say. Now I need to speculate on what he was saying. PC is open, mobile is closed. And you can call Google more open than iPhone. It is. But it's still Google Play and Google Services, and it's still not quite open. So you've got that. That is the type of thinking forming the foundations of what Meta is deciding to do here. And that's what I'm trying to express to this audience here. I saw a commenter saying we're turd polishing here. This is a devastating week in immersive media to have thousands of creative individuals losing their jobs all at once. It's like Alderaan, economically speaking, um, for those individuals. Now, those individuals will go off and do other things over the course of span. They'll find new projects. Magic Leap would be another mini Alderaan day. Magic Leap laid off hundreds of people all in one day. Thought the company's heart left that day that happened. That's ultimately what happened to Magic Leap, right? Its heart left the day that they had massive layoffs, and people started just dismissing Magic Leap out of hand. There's no more round C, round D, round E of
Sure.
fundraising for Magic Leap. They're not going to go raise $10 billion, $50 billion for their next efforts. All those people went and got hired by Apple and Meta and started building those things. That's what those people have to do this week who lost their jobs employed by Meta. Um, Gamer tag saying LinkedIn is incredibly saddening. Was there something you wanted to respond to there, David, before we get into more of this?
Yeah, I want to push back on a couple of things. Firstly, obviously it is tragic for those 1,500 people. It's not thousands, though. 1,500 you can't describe as thousands. I just think the analogy to Magic Leap is wrong here. I just want to recontextualize that Quest 2 was the hero device in a sense. The problem is that they haven't followed it up. Quest 2 sold more than every other 6DoF VR headset combined, right? I need to just keep contextualizing that they were on this S curve. The problem is that then Quest 3 and Quest 3S did not continue the same level of success. Quest 2 is a mainstream VR headset. I've said this before, but I've been in this industry obviously for 12 years or so now, more than that actually. Before Quest 2, in my daily life, I never encountered someone who had a headset, right? And after Quest 2, I would encounter a barber, an Uber driver, a bartender, someone at a party, and they would say either, "Oh yeah, I have one of those headsets," or "Oh yeah, my nephew has one," or my niece, or my brother. And more and more with Quest 2, I would meet people in my general life who I start, they say, "What do you do?" And I say, "Oh yeah, VR." And then they say, "Oh, well, I have one of those," or like the people I just described, the family member. Quest 2, we have to just say, it was not a failure. Quest 2 was arguably Meta's only success. I don't think even argue that. I think Quest 2 was Meta's only success. Quest 1, it had its own manufacturability issues. It actually was sold out for the majority of its lifetime. Quest 2 was as much about making something that could actually be mass produced. So I just want to point out that, like, you talk about this as if there was no success here. There was. The problem is that it hasn't been followed up. That just doing the same and kind of increasing the specs, increasing the price was a catastrophe. Quest 3S coming along and just being Quest 2 with Quest 3's internals is not actually appealing enough for people. Um, so yeah, that's kind of the pushback I wanted to do. And this is not Magic Leap. Magic Leap sold 60,000 units. Quest headsets have sold 30 million units. I just want to be clear that we're not in the same situation, and there are orders of magnitude differences here. I understand that's not what you're saying. I'm being slightly unfavorable to you. I just want to make that kind of clear in this discussion that as
So
heartless as this sounds, 10% is not 100%. Okay, there are a lot of people who are reacting in the comments right now as if the news this week is Meta closes Reality Labs. And it's tragic to those people. I really wish them the best. I hope they get another job. And a lot of these people are incredibly talented. I'm sure they will get another job. But I have to say it as callous as it sounds, because it's important to our analysis. 10% is not 100%. 90% of the people who were at Reality Labs 2 months ago are still at Reality Labs.
yeah, let's see here. What do you follow up with? Bar asking about the Quest S selling more than Quest 2. No, so if you go look at Steam, you will see a slow climb of Quest 3 up the Steam charts. And so now Quest 3 is at the top, right? So think about, is that right, David? Quest 3 is at the top, or
Yes,
it's
but
oh,
it's
they're together.
they are considered. Steam will see most
Got
ways that
it.
you connect. It will see. So it's you. The Quest 3 family is at the top. Pushback I want to give there is most Quest users never connected to a gaming PC. Most Quest users do not own a gaming PC. So we don't actually have figures. But I think from what we can ascertain and from the conversations I've had, it is quite clear that no, Quest 3S has not sold anywhere near Quest 2. No headset has. The only second place is actually PlayStation VR 1. So if you want to know 6 DOF VR headsets, we're not going to talk about 3 DOF. That doesn't matter here. Number one is Quest 2. Number two is PlayStation VR 1, and everything else is nowhere near number one and two. There is so I would say actually there was another successful VR headset, Quest 2 and PlayStation VR. No one else has made a headset that has sold more than 10 million units. Only Meta and Sony with these two headsets.
So here's I appreciate all that context. David's saying it's not everything, right? It's not comparable in these ways. But uh I need to use the phrases burning bridges and poisoning the well. Those phrases have been in the VR market rummaging around for years, and usually those phrases are referring to like a really stupid argument happening in the comments of some Reddit thread about stick locomotion versus teleport locomotion. Is one or the other going to poison the well? Um, there's a lot of people who are feeling poisoned this week. Is what I need. Is the no, wow. I just got disconnected. Am I still here? But David isn't? Because I saw him go to connecting. That was weird. Am I still here, David?
Yeah, no, sorry. I just had to get a glass of water. I was
Okay, no,
coughing very badly.
Ian, we can still see you.
Yeah,
All
no,
right,
you're
dang.
still. Apologies. Yeah, you understand. Continue, please.
That's what we get. My reality changed without my knowing, and now David pausing himself in this place with me is a completely different experience. That's what my meta experience is. So yeah, poisoning the well and burning bridges. Um, those employees, like when I hear a commenter out there going, "I'm never using Meta again." I usually know that those people are like one good product away from just coming back, right? It's just one more good product from convincing you to boot it up. But that's not the overall feeling of what Meta did this week, right? Meta, like, what gamers are going to want to forgive Meta for laying off the Batman Arkham Shadow folks and the people who made all these beautiful games. And if you're going to ship a headset next year, that's still fairly fresh in memory, all these people that lost their jobs. Um, but again, most people are just one good product away from getting back and joining up again. And so the question is, does Meta have one more good product in them? What is that good product? What are its features? What are the controllers? Are they bundled with the system? What market will that offer the game developers? So like
Well,
the next that's the high level like customers out there, gamers, may be remembering this. What about the industry that already kind of hated having to interact with Meta, already had really bad interactions with Meta already years, already had to go through 3 or 4 dev relations people because Meta kept changing their strategies every 6 months, right? So Meta changes its strategies, and the person who is your contact at Meta is yeeted into the sun. And now you've got to start up new contact with a new person. Your entire life, the next 5 years of your team, is determined by what that person on the other end of that email thinks of your game. And now it's a new person in a rotating bit of chairs. And that new person is getting new direction from up above. And so what I'm saying is an industry that already had a tough time here interacting with Meta, right? Who is going to want to do that in gaming in the future? In gaming in particular, they can go get James Cameron to make Terminator for VR. They can go get EA to make Battlefield for VR. But
Well, they're
there's
not.
still just if that happened,
Well, hold on. I think we need to be clear here. That's they like we need to see what this is. Meta's not interested in VR gaming anymore. They consider that to
yeah.
have failed, right? That's not.
That's
So I
sorry. That
think the
was you
answer is
stopped
they
me
don't.
off.
I think the answer
If
is
they
Meta
did
doesn't
that,
care.
yeah.
They don't care. Why would they? They're not funding VR games anymore. That's
Well, no, no, sorry. Terminator was not a game. Imagine Terminator made for imagine Meta making a full length James Cameron directed Terminator movie in meta immersive format.
so yes, that's more likely to see. I think the writing was already on the wall here. We were talking for months about how Meta's headset strategy was changing. It is quite clear that what Meta is planning for early 2027 is a headset that is heavily focused on the same things that Apple Vision Pro is focused on: sitting down, interacting with virtual screens, immersive video, and other seated passive content. Extremely unlikely that it will ship with controllers at this point. I think that would be a huge surprise. I see someone here saying, thank you, David. Meta doesn't care about gaming. The irony here is that Meta was the only company that did care about VR gaming until 2 days ago. And nobody gave them any credit for it. They spent billions of dollars porting Resident Evil 4 to VR, Medal of Honor. They built multiple AAA RPGs with the Asgard's Wrath series, Batman Arkham Shadow, and everyone still said Meta doesn't care about gaming. They were the only company that did give a shit about gaming, and but nobody cared, and so now they're saying, "Fuck you." Okay, you want to see what not looking like not caring about gaming is? I'll show you what not caring about gaming is. We're not going to make some VR games anymore. Enjoy. We're going to do what everyone else does. So I think there was this kind of impossible standard that they were held up to when they were pouring billions of dollars into making VR games. They were accused of being the only one that didn't care about VR gaming. And now people are going to see what that really looks like. You're going to see what it really looks like for Meta to not care. The next headset that Meta releases, this Quest Air or whatever they end up calling it, whatever, it doesn't matter. The name is irrelevant to the point. It's going to be focused on everything but gaming. They are going to try a content light strategy where this thing is essentially a laptop, coming back to the kind of portable PC, the PC headset argument. It is going to be heavily focused on that. So some people are saying like they're going to get rid of VR entirely. They're not. But VR at Meta is going to look a lot different than Quest gaming. It is going to be, they want to make the Apple Vision Pro that you can afford and that you want to wear because it's 120 grams or whatever. That's what Meta's market is going for. They want the spatial computer. They want to make a general platform of Horizon OS, and that's what we're likely to see. Now, all that said, our understanding is that they actually are still working on Quest 4. My understanding is that is still being worked on. No, I have sourcing for this, that it is still being worked on, but it will not be a subsidized headset. All of this has to be put in the context of Meta has spent significantly more than it has made in VR for years now. That the idea here was that the revenue would increase and the cost would come down and they make it into sustainable business. But as we keep saying over and over again, fewer headsets were sold in 2025 and 2024, so that isn't working. So they're going to make this into sustainable business. They're going to sell a headset for more than it costs to make, because at some point you have this giant library, but they're not going to make the games for it. They're going to do exactly what Valve does. The irony is
They
let other
don't have a
people.
giant library, David.
Of course they do.
That's
The Quest store has the biggest library in VR gaming. You
no.
there. What do you mean? No, it's objectively true. It is objectively true.
I mean, the biggest library in VR gaming is on the internet.
What do you mean by that on the
I
internet?
mean, it's on BitTorrent, it's on forums, it's on ever. It's like you're talking about a storefront compared to open. Is what I'm getting at. Like
But
it's a library is not a store. A library is what I keep in my bookcase.
okay,
Like and
you do
where
for
my
the
bookcase of data is like it's on the internet and it's in a storage drive. It's not on a storefront, and
for you.
that's like the critical difference here.
This is look. This is like we're having a discussion where I talk about people having their Nintendo Switch library, and you say, "No, I don't have a Nintendo Switch. I download this Citra emulator and get my ROMs on the internet."
Okay,
The majority of people they buy their video games from the store, their Xbox store, their PlayStation
let
store,
me
the
give you
Nintendo store, and they play them. I understand that what you want is different, but if we're talking on a market scale, it is objectively true to say that Meta has by far the largest VR gaming library at the moment. It's just objectively true.
uh, but I'm saying my critique there is whether that's a large library, not whether it's the largest in VR. It's not a large library. It's not anything that people value enough to come back to.
I think it is. I think absolutely it is. There are more VR games on the Quest store than I would ever have time to play. We're actually in a situation where there are so many great games right now that have come out on not just Quest, they're on Steam VR and a PlayStation VR 2 as well. But let me put it this way. Um, Ask a PlayStation VR 2 owner whether they would trade their library for Quests. Forget the graphics. Say the graphics would be magically upgraded, okay? Because that's to do with the hardware. Ask a PlayStation VR 2 owner whether if they could snap their finger and have the PlayStation Store and Quest Store magically swap, right? It's a magic button. They would all do it. Of course they would. And ask a Pico owner. Of course they would. Ask an Android XR person who got it for gaming. Not That's not really a market yet, so that's not important. But look, I see a lot of the commenters are getting very, very frustrated with this part of the conversation. I'm
Can
going
I
to
give it?
repeat it. It's objectively true to say that the Quest has the
All
largest
right.
game library. It absolutely is.
Let me give you two on the ground examples of how I spent my Christmas break. Right, you got sick. I tried to uh, play games with my kids, and I tried to have my kids play games with their friends. So I bought a Meta Xbox 3S Xbox Edition, whatever, last year for myself just to try it out or just to have it. I felt it would be a nice collector's item to have on the wall. Then I hear from late in the year a mom, a friend of my kids, saying, "Hey, my kid wants a VR. What can you suggest?" And I go, "Okay, I got just the thing for you. Come over. I'll set you up with the Xbox edition." She comes over. She sets it. I set it up with her. We spend a whole 3 hour thing setting up our devices so that she can properly manage her kid. Um, Over Christmas, she and her son come over and try to play VR with my son. I've got one Quest headset here, one Quest headset here. The two kids could not get into a game together. One is 10, one is 12. Both are technically allowed to use Meta services, but not the 10-year-old isn't allowed online, I think, now, according to their rules. So he's blocked from interacting with the other kid who's standing in the room right next to him, both of them under watch by their parents. Like both of us can have all the settings set up right to pull up their views and watch them in VR. No matter how I who is more equipped in the world to try to go and do what I'm doing than someone who's already done it, right? I've already gotten my kid into a headset and had him set up in virtual worlds. Here's another kid and a mom that I've tried to set up. He's already played a game. Let's get these two kids together in the same room to play a game together. Could not happen. This is insane that I'm doing this in 2025, that this is my software problem. Then I go to my switches. My kid has a switch that's got a cracked screen on. He hasn't taken real good care of it. My switch has a scratch on it. I haven't taken great care of it, but it's a little bit better condition. For years, I've had multiple accounts on these devices. I've had one for me, one for the kids. The one for the kids has just been like where their save data goes, right? They log into my games sometimes using their save data. Over this Christmas break, I started using the first time the virtual, what they call virtual game cards inside the Nintendo ecosystem. And I believe how this works is it goes and checks whether my Switch is logged in to the game. And if not, it checks his system into the game, my kid's system into the game. So it virtually on the screen, the card like removes from my system and goes to float over into his system and go inside there. Okay. Um, that worked for the first time over this Christmas holiday. I've tried to make that experience work in the past with Nintendo software. It's been a disaster. It worked really seamlessly once I got everything right. And now I have one digital library of content that's attached to my account that the other children in my family can check out virtual cards to their Switch systems wherever they are in the world. And all that's required is my Switch system has to be connected online to tell it like I'm not playing the game right now and do that.
I thought
That's a
online
library of
libraries.
content I care about, David.
But you need an
That's
online account. What? How could this isn't swapping cartridges? You need an online Nintendo account and be connected to the internet. That's not a library. It's not a book.
it's so when Meta Bosworth came out and said what he gave his ex. So remember what happened here. Let's go back in history and say first thing he tried to do, or first time Meta tried to do, is they tried to add ads to a couple of games. Then they tried to link your Facebook account to your usage of a Quest headset. They tried to do both those things to make it an ad space. They found out that was a bad idea and pulled back from it. Then Meta AI popped up around all of that. But Bosworth said when that whole shift, before that shift happened, before he tried to do
Mm.
account linking and that stuff. We're going to make new meta accounts, fresh start. We're like, or sorry, I'm reversing it. He says, okay, that didn't work. Let's do meta accounts. They rename the company, right? We're going to put entitlements inside the meta accounts. He, it's meta saying everything we just did wasn't working. Let's try a fresh start with meta accounts. Let's put your entitlements in it. This is that is my library, David. We're talking about my library, my entitlements in my Meta account. And there are people out there who have invested hundreds of dollars in their Meta libraries and the entitlements that are attached to that Meta account that got turned on a few years ago after Facebook account linking didn't work, right? Is that what is I'm forgetting all the account
Yeah, they got rid
things.
of the need to link a Facebook account, and you just had a Meta account, which is just like you have with a PlayStation account. It's an email and password.
Fantastic. Okay. So they do all this moving around of the platforms, and some people are spending hundreds of dollars. But here's the thing about like when you say the biggest library of content, David,
VR content.
of VR content, man, Valve, we went to Valve and we saw them make all of Steam content VR compatible.
It depends.
Depends
Okay,
what I mean. Yes,
you
a
can use
flat screen window is now
okay,
VR
but you know
compatible.
what I mean when I say VR. Playing a flat screen game in a headset, that's not what I mean by VR gaming. I think we all can say if I say the phrase VR gaming, it doesn't mean playing a you could say then Quest because it has Xbox Cloud Gaming has the largest VR. That's just silly though. Let's use words to mean something and say that VR gaming means being inside the video game and
Uh,
looking
uh,
around and you're in the virtual world, not looking at the virtual world on a screen in front of you.
You are correct, and I'm appreciating. So we're not arguing here. We're picking apart our words, and we need to wrap up here soon as we move to the end of this episode. We've really appreciated the discussion. What time are we at, David? We needed to keep this to 2 hours, anyways. Where are we?
Yeah,
I don't know where we are in the
I don't
runtime. Oh yeah,
I
I've
don't
got
have it
a.
in
I
front of me.
can't see it on the live show. Let's see if I click it. Anyways,
I think we're just under two.
yeah. So we're near the end, and the the it's a sad day for people to see this reckoning of strategy. And now David and I are getting pretty heated trying to figure out what is the strategy. We're seeing it in our audience, in our comments. What is the strategy? What is the strategy? It's fear out there. And no one wants it's frustrating. Like you've commented on people the double standard of criticizing I saw it in our comments. We hated Meta for entering. Now we hated Meta for leaving. That's
Yeah.
essentially
It's
that's a huge
it's
double
like some
standard.
guy was giving you free food for a year and then he stopped giving you free food. Can you really be angry at him for, when like I don't know. It just seems so entitled to be like, oh, this company that was throwing billions of dollars at VR gaming, now that they haven't done it. The last thing I want to bring up is something that I keep seeing brought up that is just so disingenuous. And it's this claim that what happened here was that Meta bought up all of these indie studios that were building VR games for for everyone. And then Meta bought them up and brought all their games onto Quest exclusive and then killed the studios. And it's a really appealing narrative and it makes so much sense when you think about it. When you don't think about it. But then let's actually challenge that because it's nonsense. All of these studios only ever made the VR games that Meta fully funded them to make in the first place. So, Ready at Dawn. Ready at Dawn never made a VR game before Lone Echo. It was Lone Echo, and Meta gave them tens of millions of dollars to make Lone Echo. So they bought a studio that had only ever done, and before, can I point out, same thing with Twisted Pixel and Defector and, Wilson's Heart. Same thing with Sanzaru. Asgard's Wrath 1 was a fully funded Meta exclusive for Rift. And in fact, a lot of these studios were only ever contract studios. And what I mean by contract studios, before Meta, Microsoft or Sony was paying them. A lot of these studios spent their entire lives just taking a contract from a console maker, Sony, Microsoft, Meta, and building games. So, like, there's this narrative here that had Meta not bought these studios, we'd be in some kumbaya paradise where Lone Echo is being made for Steam and PlayStation VR 2. It's completely ignorant of what these studios were. They were contract studios. They were a lot of them, like I said, one of them, I can't remember which one off the top of my head, spent its entire life just porting PlayStation games to PlayStation Vita for Sony. And the other one was actually owned by Microsoft. I think Twisted Pixel was owned by Microsoft for 5 years. And then Microsoft sold them off to independents. And then, so I just want to point that out. It would be a tragedy if we were in this market where Meta was buying up these independent studios and then killing them. But that actually hasn't happened. The only time that that's happened was with Onward. But up until Onward's death, it was still releasing every single update on Steam, right? So Onward is a great example of that. You could argue Onward's an example of that. But as for all the rest, what are people thinking that these studios were? They were never they were never indie studios. They were contract studios. So all I see all over the internet is this discussion of this narrative that's complete bullshit. If someone has just made it up and nobody has stopped to think, hang on a minute, is this actually true? Because it isn't.
I love that context, David. I have to balance it with investing in content that you made emotional connections to. That's part of what I say about the biggest library, right? You get around to Christmas time and a parent says to a kid, "Hey kid, I think you're ready for Grand Theft Auto." Right? I'm gonna get you Grand Theft Auto for Christmas. You plop down on the latest console, the latest game, and that kid goes away into their room for 5 days playing Grand Theft Auto, right? Whatever the game is, whatever your particular love, game from your childhood that's grown up into this amazing quadruple A media franchise over the years, that's the experience. But for the last 6 years, right, on Quest ecosystems, it's been what is the game that Meta has paid for to appear on the Quest store? That is the game that I'm going to send you off to your bedroom to go play in VR. And the kid only goes off for about 2 hours. They don't go off for about 5 days. They're not entertained. The entertainment value uh, is off. It's just not, there is no market for that thing. And then you need to go a step beyond this dynamic that I'm just discussing and think about the love that you attach to the space, right? My kid my kids were brokenhearted to hear that Bogo was being shown the door. They were digging a hole for him out back and going to put him in a virtual hole. Um, a free experience on a platform that was just a sampler to explain how the platform works is the most emotionally captivating thing that the kids ever experienced on Quest headsets. It's the most memorable thing. And it was 5 minutes, right? It was 10 minutes. Me holding the kid up to pick an apple, a virtual apple off a tree. It's a memorable experience for me outside of virtual reality for my kid. And those were the things that like were of value here that they just didn't see were of value. They didn't build on those moments. They didn't like say, "Oh, how do we stretch that out to 30 minutes from being just 20 minutes?" They went straight for the jugular. Let's go for Grand Theft Auto.
Well,
And
has
without thinking whether all of the aspects of Grand Theft Auto are going to work in VR properly.
sure, but I would just say, has anyone else? Who else made the BOGO that's successful in 30 minutes, right? Like some of this is just if nobody's done it, maybe it's just not a good idea, or it's just not something that is doable or practical with today's technology. Just want to respond to one comment. I say Major T saying Lone Echo was made before Meta bought Oculus, David. I think you were referring to Ready at Dawn. Lone Echo came many, many years after that. But Lone Echo and Asgard's Wrath, they were made before Meta owned the studios, but Meta funded them 100%. Maybe I'm being kind of a bit presumptuous here to say that people actually know this. Like, I need you to all understand this. All of these games that you think of as being the glory days of PC VR, none of them were organic. None of them. Lone Echo was entirely 100% every single dollar funded by Meta.
Echo
In a
VR was
world,
tens of thousands of people, as I recall,
yes,
online.
but entirely funded by Meta. Ready at Dawn did not make this of their own volition. Ready at Dawn was a contract studio. I keep needing to repeat this because it's just become the biggest myth in VR is this idea that PC VR was thriving and there were all these studios making VR games and then Meta came and killed them. No, it was always Meta with a hand puppet. There was always Meta with their hand up the puppet. The puppet wasn't alive, people. The puppet doesn't speak. It's the puppet master. Meta was Asgard's Wrath entirely 100% every single dollar funded by Meta. It would not have existed had Meta not built it. Same thing with a bunch of the PC VR games from back then. And so it's just this supreme irony that like they build it and then they buy the studio to more efficiently make more. And they did, right? They made a Lone Echo 2. That was the swan song for PC VR, right? Um, Look, to be clear, I'm not defending Meta here. I'm just saying there are many valid criticisms, and we can talk all day about how they invested in the wrong things, they mismanaged these studios, of the tragedy of how we didn't see something new from some of these studios. All of that is completely valid. But that the idea that this was ever organic in the first place, there has never been an organic
No,
gaming high budget triple A fidelity VR market. It was all Meta money the entire time. It was their hand was up the puppet.
well, I like my puppet and walkabout mini golf. The 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 comments are all over the board. People are fretting out there. They're trying to wrap their heads around our points. They're trying to wrap their heads around the points being made. Um, in the comments, headset historian, people keep pointing at Steam Frame as a savior in the face of Meta's news, but Valve won't be funding anything.
That's the
That
irony.
said, it could be a healthier platform going forward and might be
That's
organic.
the irony. People are saying, how dare Meta stop funding VR games? I'm going to go buy the Steam frame from the company that hasn't funded a single VR game in 6 years. If you want to have a consistent position of saying, I don't believe in artificially inflating the market. I think it was a bad thing. That's a completely valid position. But like you can't be against it and for it. You either have to say if you have that position that it was a bad thing for Meta to artificially inflate the market with these giant AAA exclusives, then you should be overjoyed that they're no longer doing it. Your reaction should be, I'm so glad that Meta is no longer inflating the market. Let's see what an organic VR gaming market looks like. Let's see, folks. I don't think you're going to like it so much, but let's see.
Yeah, they gave you what you wished for.
Yeah. And the
Um,
other thing I want to point out is, other than these 100% funded exclusives, I think a lot of people have no idea just how many partially funded VR games were out there. How many of your favorite VR games actually did receive partial funding from Meta? Um,
oh yeah,
a
and
huge number of the titles that are available on Steam for VR have had partial funding by Meta. Some of them get 20%, some of them get 30%, some of them get 50%, and like it's a strange thing that they never required these devs to disclose it because I can tell you right now from direct knowledge there are a shocking number of VR games where you would not believe that they was, say, 40% funded by Meta.
Yeah, and but in it all getting it on the platform, and in comparison, you hear nightmare stories at companies like I guess I shouldn't name them, but at other companies that pretended they had publishing initiatives, and then just pulling the rug out of the people who are supposedly funding those initiatives, right? So like you can imagine a scenario where like you thought you had a lot of money to give devs and then you didn't. And that's, Meta poured money into all sorts of things, going back to Oculus Game Jams. The context I need to add to all of that, David. Okay, so if you're going back into the timeline, um, you're saying they did Lone Echo 1 and they also got the funding to do Echo VR as a multiplayer test, if I recall correctly. Is that how that original funding plan worked?
Yes,
Um,
100% of all of those projects were 100% funded by Meta. Yes, everything Ready at Dawn did in VR, 100% every dollar funded by Meta.
and it's all been on Meta platforms. So Echo VR becomes this tens of thousands of people thing in last decade of people building a community inside a zero G VR sport. And I'm going to conferences where people are playing this zero G sport, and people paid by Meta are setting up uh, 9, 12, 15 cameras inside of a big facility to give each one of a four-member crew or a six-member team, whatever, full wraparound tracking to move around in VR and play Echo Arena exactly like you would. So like they're bringing this game to the masses. They're putting it in places where gamers are. It's got this incredibly cumbersome system that it runs on back in the day, and now the really uncumbered the system that isn't cumbersome, the Echo the Quest is coming to run it as well. And so they fostered and protected this ecosystem for years. And then they pulled the plug on that while we were in the VR download. We were live inside of VR download when our commenters started reporting the news that they announced Echo VR is no more. And there's a clip out there of us live reacting here at the moment that Meta has put it out into the internet. That that's the moment that Meta's like stopped making the right decisions for gamers, David. Like that's ultimately my problem. I can't criticize them for the funding that they've put into all of these games over the years. They've propped up in it and they've taught thousands of developers how to make VR games. That's what that funding did over over the span of 10 years. However, the moment that they killed Echo VR, they sort of stabbed the heart of what they were doing the first time. And did they stab it again this week? You tell me, David.
Yeah, look, I mean, Echo VR was an incredible game. I really liked it myself. It's tragedy that it closed. At the same time, the scale that these companies are looking for is much larger than that. It wasn't big enough for them to care about. I wish it existed on a personal level. I think it's an example of why it would be better for players for these things to happen organically, especially on multiplayer. If you look at kind of the Gorilla Tag developers' new project, it's kind of a spiritual successor there. It's there's a reason that Echo VR is closed and Beat Saber is open. I'll put it that way. Fundamentally, like Meta can want what it wants, but it does react to the market slowly and over the course of years and gritting its teeth, but it does. And at the end of the day, they're going to like, I think our disagreement here, or maybe a wider disagreement, is that my view is that all of this fundamentally comes down to what people choose to do. Okay. If people choose not to buy headsets, it doesn't matter whether Meta would like that to be the case or not. That's the market reality they react to. If people buy Beat Saber, Meta's not going to make it free to play. If people didn't buy Population One, then Meta did make it free to play. You know, these are things, it's supply decisions follow the demand signals. And
And I think,
unfortunately, the demand
yeah,
signal wasn't there.
and if you feel crazy in the VR community, like like if you feel like Meta's strategy has been a little bit schizophrenic, like they've been swapping, chasing new things every 6 months, they have. And that's an experience that developers experienced viscerally. That was their work life for years, was to experience different edicts coming down from Mark Zuckerberg and their team there on what you're actually building. And like I it, we should close out the stream here today, but ultimately, David, I don't know what the future of this broadcast looks like because of these changes. You've got to go figure out what we're going to use. We can't use workrooms for more than a month. I would prefer to use Apple Vision Pro and its personas. This is pushing me
Absolutely.
real hard there.
So would I. But again,
I
we
know.
brought this up so many times. We're not going to pay a human being to sit in an Apple Vision Pro for 3 hours and keep their eyes and head perfectly still, plus the fact that their foveation would be a problem.
I think that
It's
problem is
impractical.
going to be solved this year. I
I
think we're
would
going
love
to
to see
solve
it.
that.
I would absolutely love to see it. But, um, I look, I would,
Is
like I said,
workrooms closing in 1 month? Geeky Gary says.
yes, yes.
We
I,
found that coming in here today. Yeah.
yeah.
We'll have an article on it, uploadvr.com sometime soon. Thank you,
So
David,
sorry, just
for
one.
yeah.
Just I see
Go ahead.
someone getting things done saying you don't have to do that with Vision Pro. Sorry if I sound a bit frustrated. I'm just, I'm sick and I've had to explain this so many times. Trust us when we say that we know
There
what
is
we're
a
talking
tool though,
about.
I think, in the works.
There is not. You, as a developer, you cannot get a third person
A
view.
developer. Yeah.
No, as an app developer,
Yeah.
you cannot on Vision OS get a third person view of spatial personas. How even Apple themselves did it was to just put a human being in a Vision Pro and have them as a human camera, and they were able to disable foveation. You can do webcam grids where it's literally the exact same thing as if we just put a webcam on, in which case we would just use a webcam. So you would all see just a webcam grid on YouTube like you would on any other podcast, except that webcam would be populated by a 2D persona. We could do that, but it wouldn't be, we would no longer actually kind of be in a spatial environment together. We wouldn't be able to put up like images together. It would be just like any other podcast.
I
Um,
think Bradley had another headset set up pointed at him to do
it,
this explicit purpose, and he had hacked it to probably be open,
so
right?
sorry, if you're talking about just him doing a solo thing, you can do a solo one, but you can't do a shared
Okay.
thing. This is
Yes. Okay.
trust me that I know what I'm talking about. I don't mean to be rude about this, but I promise you I've looked into this extensively and I know that what I'm saying is true. You you can do it for one space locally. Okay, you can get a third person view locally, but you cannot do that in a FaceTime spatial persona call.
What my problem? You're right. Well, Apple controls those keys. Can we both say Apple controls those keys still?
Yes,
Are we on the same page there?
developers cannot actually use spatial personas. It is exclusive to FaceTime. They can put windows and volumes around it, but they only control the windows and volumes. Apple controls everything else. Apple could do it tomorrow. It is not some fundamental technical limitation. It is a choice in the architecture of Vision OS.
S- s-
The second that Apple changes this, we will be doing our podcast in spatial personas. I promise you. We're not doing this because we don't like spatial personas. I love spatial personas. I would love to do this podcast in spatial personas. You cannot do a virtual third person camera for multiple spatial personas. It cannot be done.
what what we're describing here, what you're describing, is Meta is killed off some APIs, and Apple has not granted access yet to some other APIs, right?
They haven't built an API. Yes, they would have to build an API that either ideally how this would work is that they allow um, a Mac to be a spatial persona participant that would be a floating virtual, webcam within this spatial persona environment, positionally in sixed off. Um, I see someone saying, they've asked Apple developers to allow us to do this for the last 2 years. So have we. We absolutely would love it. It's something that Apple has chosen to do. There are good privacy reasons. Because if you could do this, then you would actually be able to kind of create a third person camera that could then kind of theoretically spy on someone's conversation. I understand from like a privacy perspective, they should just allow the FaceTime client that already exists for Mac to have a spatial feature. That's the easiest way to pull this off.
There's a collection of people out there asking for us to just go for VR chat. They've grown accustomed, I guess, to our to our expressive avatars as it is, and they're like, "Oh, we want you to just go with the expressive avatars and go to VR chat." That's a fair argument. We could probably pull off a decent studio in VR chat if we wanted, but
Yeah.
also the what I love about using the system level technologies is we get all these system level demos of what is and isn't working, and hypothetically, as the system gets better, like I can hand things to David and he can hand things to me, and so building it inside VRChat's ecosystem means we're kind of tethered to VRChat's
Yeah,
ecosystem. That's one
look,
part
VR
of it.
chat would be an ideal solution. I see someone asking about what about Android's Persona API likeness. So it doesn't have a spatial mode at all. It is entirely just webcam views. Um, it is literally just webcam views. I look, I share
Jonas,
everyone's. Yeah, look, we would love to. We don't have time. I would genuinely love to. Uh,
let's get David recovered from his illness. Let's get us wire. Let's get our grounding in this new market, in understanding how many VR games are going to come out each year. I'm going to say I'm going to go on. I have very few reasons to put on my Quest. Two of the reasons were Meta has sent me something, and a developer has sent me something. I don't expect Meta to send me a whole lot of things in the next year to test on the Quest headsets. But if you're a dev out there and you've got something cool that you're prototyping and trying to get ready for the next thing, and you're doing that on a Quest headset, oh, you should be in contact with me. I want to hear about that. I want you in my inbox telling about your cool thing built for the future. But like that's my real talk. Like I don't have a whole lot. Their removal of this lifeline of games is like just another reason for me not
but
to be putting on a Quest and
did
put
you
on
play
another
them?
headset that I prefer using.
But did you play? Were you ever interested in this? When's the last time you played like a single player VR game of that style anyway? You're not really a
When's the last time I
VR
had my
gamer.
controllers near my headset is a good question.
No, it's I would like you to answer the specific question. When's the last time you played a traditional single player VR game
Uh, I
by
played
choice?
like a new game or make Half-Life Alex and stuff. I played over the
Well,
break in
yeah, like a
testing
new.
with.
When's the last time you played a new single player VR game? The thing is, you're saying like oh, I don't really put on my Quest, but you're not really the target audience. You're not. You're not really a VR gamer, and it's a VR gaming
Why are we
headset.
playing both of these games? You're right, and I'm telling you, I'm telling Meta that like, well, what do I did Walkabout Mini Golf, and I didn't play it. I did a tour of it, and I got to see around. It looked beautiful, and I can't wait to go back.
What headset do you
Right,
prefer to play Walkabout Mini Golf on?
my Vision Pro, streaming my PC.
Okay, so you use PC VR via
Because I
Apple
can
Vision.
record. I've gone over this. I can record a 4K. I can record a 4K video tour
Sure. Say
through
you
that
did. Okay.
thing, but
Say
I
you.
can't. But I don't
But
because Quest is more convenient, and I
sure.
don't. I would prefer to answer your question. I would prefer the other setup, but I do it in the Quest because it's more convenient.
What do you? What do you mean more convenient?
It's standalone and it works.
So your headset of choice for Walkabout Mini Golf is the Quest.
I'm forced to use Walkabout Mini Golf on my Quest because it doesn't record in four. Like it's the easiest one to get into at the time of recording. Same reason the studio, like same reason we used the studio for years. It
Yeah.
was you had our studio running on HTC Vive or on Valve Index, and there were times where I was logging in on Index, and each day I would log in on Index, it would forget which microphone I was using for our stream. The moment you made that choice to focus us here on a standalone version, that problem went away, and boom, we got it down like clockwork. We're jumping into
Yeah.
studio 30 seconds before. Yeah, standalone. There was a quote from NextVR when they were laying off the vast majority of their people before they took what all their technology and sold it to Apple. And he said, um, the standalone did what we thought it would do. That quote from a startup founder who just laid off a vast majority of his people is saying we have the signal here to continue this. We just can't continue it at this scale. And look where we are all these years later. Like, yes, standalone was the solution, but there were all these other problems with it. So you asked me which I prefer. David, that's a very complicated question because of the stack of situations here. I would prefer to record the walkabout tours for this channel in 4K video, but that would require me to use the Meta headset connected to my PC instead of my Apple Vision Pro connected to my PC. And I just don't want to, it seems like a time investment and a waste of time. Like, because Meta's moved on from it. Why shouldn't I?
Yeah, I get what you. I was more asking if you didn't have to do the recording, if you were just generally, if a friend of yours said, "I just got a VR headset, I want to play some walkabout mini golf with you," and you get that text on your iPhone, which headset do you go and pick up to play walkabout mini golf with them, just on a
Eh,
personal level, not to do with work?
I would probably have to pick up the Quest. Yeah.
So I just so you know, I just yeah, that's kind of that's all I'm saying. It is a good way to even do casual VR
You're
gaming.
describing convenience, not preference.
Well, your preference is made on the basis of convenience, which is a massively important part of the product.
All right. I think that's probably a good time to end this podcast. Our audience is confused about who we are and what our motivations are. Ian is so funny. That doesn't make any sense as Onakazi. All right. Well, I guess we'll continue it next week. Do you think you'll be better next week, David? Is this
God, I
thing
hope
has
so.
been, yeah, I
I
hope you're,
don't know if people have noticed how much I've been muting here, but if I have coughed, I apologize. It's just I'm
no,
sick of
honestly, I
coughing
haven't
all
heard
day
much
long.
coughing from you.
I
And the
think
thing
I've
is,
got it.
I
Sorry,
heard the
can you?
coughing at the beginning, right, David? And it's like you muted yourself the rest of the show, but like I've been worried about you. Thank you for all the support out there.
Yeah,
Everyone who's been long VR is still long VR. Like that's the thing. I didn't hear anyone who is really long VR go, VR's done this week. I saw a lot of people who arrived the last 5 years go, oh God, it's done. But I didn't see the people that have been around for like 10 years going. And there's plenty of people who have joined us in the last 5 years going, I'm still around here for the next 22. So,
yeah.
anyways, thank you for the discussion, David. Thank you for putting together this podcast despite our studio breaking on us. And we'll see you in the future.
Thanks so much for everyone's well wishes in the comments to feel better. Yeah, like I said, I spent the first week of this year literally unable to get out of bed, the sickest I've been in my entire adult life. So I'm glad, honestly, at this one, I'm glad I can actually use computers again. I couldn't use a computer for like a week, which is crazy, the longest I've gone without using a computer. So thank you, everyone, to your well wishes. I will be spending the next few days continuing to catch up on everything that has happened since then. Um, I, God damn it. You can see I had to mute the cough there. Yeah, I really, really hate having to cough every 30 seconds. But well wishes to anyone else who is also dealing with winter illnesses. I feel your pain. It really can suck. Uh,
Virtual
I
virtual
see
desktop
Tanglor
just
saying,
popped in on the comments right at the end here.
I
Yeah,
love.
thank you for tuning in, Guy, out there. Leave a comment. We'll pin it to the top if you have if virtual desktop has anything that they want to say about this week of VR news. We'll see you in the future.
I love Tanglor's comment. What a wimp. Me and my young kids had the flu and just got on with it without moaning. Thanks for that. I promise you, if I could, I would. I genuinely, I couldn't even lift up the glass to drink water. It was that bad. I really, truly wish that it was that I was being a wimp. I promise you, I was not. I've never felt like in my entire adult life. So whatever that was, I don't know. Maybe you had a different flu than I had. Yeah, I was in. It was excruciating for multiple days.
And now I
Every
don't want to
muscle
leave
in
the
my
house
body.
anymore. Thanks, David. You just gave me a motivation to stay inside my VR headset a lot more. All right.
Yeah,
All right. We'll see you
I'm
in the
not
future.
leaving the house either. I don't want anyone's illnesses anymore. I'm sick of it. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for all the well wishes. And yeah, I okay, Taglor, I get it. Somehow you're magically not affected. I was. Thanks. Goodbye. Thank you, everyone.